What we're going to be studying this unit is the more practical technological use for electricity. So we'll be studying circuits and components and appliances. How much money does it cost to run an appliance? The circuit diagrams that we're going to do are similar to pulley problems in that there are a couple of really simple, basic rules that I'm going to turn into some really complicated, meaty problems. Once you really understand it, they're fun. They're like puzzles. But it'll be a little painful in the meantime. But trust me, most of you will get there. Talk to the kids who did circuit diagrams last year, and they'll be like, oh, yes, they're really hard. But then once it clicks, all better. So just hang with me. You can trust me. We'll get to this. So here's the initial analogy. We're going to be, these are conductors versus last unit, we're really talking about a lot of insulators. So not static electric charge, but flowing electric charge. And the analogy that we use is this water flowing through a hose, okay? So in this analogy, and it works on a lot of levels, the water is the current, and current is at C of E, free-flowing electrons in metals, in conductors. So water is the current. The pump, in this case, is actually like the battery or the power source. Now, it doesn't always have to be a battery. It can be, we'll talk about alternating versus direct current, but think of the pump as the battery. And the line, the hose, in this particular case, the line right here, think of this like a soaker hose, you know, like in a garden. So that's the resistor, or it's an appliance. And then the connecting hose, where the water flows more freely, that would be like the wires, okay? We're going to be using schematic diagrams, so this isn't quite one yet, but you're going to be drawing, oh, and I forgot, the valve is like a switch. But you're going to be drawing these circuit diagrams. We're not going to draw them quite at this level of detail, but this is a dry cell, this is the battery. A switch, if you were looking at it from above, would look kind of like a door. And then resistors are squiggly lines. So you will be drawing lots and lots of these, and you'll get very efficient at drawing these, okay? So we'll use this analogy over and over and over again, okay? Well, that's not too bad. Not too shiny. This analogy will continue when you think about where in or in what conditions does water flow most easily. Water will flow through a wider diameter hose more easily than a narrow diameter hose. That is also true for current. If you use thick diameter wires, more current will flow more easily. If you drive under the big high voltage wires that are coming out of the Cook plant or Palisades, and if you look closely, those are some very big wires, upwards of a foot in diameter in some places. So the reason for that is those are carrying lots and lots of current. What's interesting about this is that you can get the same effect out of a whole bunch of little wires sort of twisted together to make a bigger wire. So you don't have to for example, have one single piece of copper. It wouldn't be nearly as flexible and easy to maneuver as if you took a whole bunch of thin strands of copper and sort of bundled them together. So it works the same way, whether it's a bunch of little ones or one big wire. We already had talked about this, that third prong on a plug that you plug into the outlet is a grounding wire. Those are safety devices, and you know that eventually that grounding wire is hooked up to a big conductive post that's usually pounded into the ground. And yes, indeed, we're also going to talk a little bit about electrocution and human beings. And I think, for Perry's sake, I'm going to wait. He's been waiting all year to talk about current wars, AC versus DC. There was like a big battle. And so he's like, it would be almost cruel to talk about that today while he's not here. So we'll put that off. All right. So circuits, like the original picture that we had here, I drew it, or I found it, I should say, as a complete circle. They have the same root, circuit and circle. In order for a current to flow in a circle, it does have to make a completed loop, okay? So here we're going to do a little activity. You can just write this on scrap paper. And I'm going to ask you which light bulbs will light. A light bulb, a traditional light bulb, or even like a fluorescent gas light bulb, work as follows. There's a conductive like base that has a cuff, and that's where the threads are. So the base itself is a good conductor. And then, of course, there's the glass, not a good conductor. And there's also like a little nubbin on the bottom. That is also a conductor. These two, the nubbin and the cuff, are actually separated, and they're not connected together as part of the loop. But in between, on the inside, there's a wire that's attached to the cuff. So imagine that, and then there's a filament. And then if you follow it down through the inside, it's attached to the nubbin on the bottom, okay? The filament is actually high resistance wire, similar to the coils that you see inside of a toaster. And so if you've ever looked inside of a toaster while it was making your morning toast, you notice that those coils glow. Same thing is true of this filament. It's a little bit, it's in the higher frequency white light end of the spectrum versus, you know, the lower frequency red light end of the spectrum, which is in toasters. So this filament will, when you heat it up, glow, and it gives off light. By the way, inside the glass, it's they're usually filled with an inert gas, and they're also partially evacuated. If you recall the story about how my mom used to give me light bulbs and let me throw them against the back of the garage. I told you that story, right? Yes. Yes. So my mom would, and I thought this was a normal thing, like everybody did this. I found out when I was like about 7 years old that this is not a normal thing. But she would give me burned out light bulbs and say, go throw it against the back of the garage. And there was nothing behind the garage except for broken glass from burned out light bulbs. And it was fun to do because these are partially evacuated, and when they break, they make a loud pop. So that was always fun. And I went to a friend's house, and a light bulb burned out in their like living room, and I'm like, oh, let's go throw it out against the back of the garage. The mother was not too happy about that because my friend was like, yeah, that's a great idea. Not all families do this. So the reason for that partial vacuum is to reduce the rate of evaporation. And when these filaments get so thin, they'll actually break. All right. What's connected to make this light bulb light is, you can think of, there's usually a conductor that's attached to the outer cuff, and then there's a battery. Okay? And then, so there's like a positive terminal to the battery, if we do this, and then a negative terminal to the battery. And then the other wire is attached to the nubbin. And do you see how that would make a complete circuit? Okay. So your job is to look at the these diagrams. Got it? Yeah. So I want you to look at each of those examples and just kind of write it down on a scratch piece of paper, a yes or no, which one will light. Which ones will light. So you're just going to say yes or no to each of those letters, and then we'll compare and see how we did.